Hi everyone, I'm Priyanka. I'm the Senior Academic Advisor at Crimson Education India. Today I have here with me Kunal Mehra, resident admissions expert who has mentored over 1,000 students across the last 2 decades. He's here with us today to answer some of the most essential questions parents and students grapple with on their journey to college admissions. All right, today's question is: does one have a higher probability of getting into a top college if they go to a certain high school?
The short answer is no. The long answer is also no. But on a serious note, uh, again, let's understand from an admission officer's perspective, from a top university's perspective, what do they want, right? Universities are in the business of looking for the best students from across the globe and bring them into a classroom and give them the environment to thrive, right? They are not here to find students from a certain city, country, or high school. No matter where these students are, which city they are in, what school they come from, if they fit into what a university believes is the right fit of student for them, they will take that student, right? Of course, many of us, whether we are counselors or parents, have done our own correlation saying we see certain students or certain schools sending a higher percentage of students to Ivy League. Now, again, going back to the same fundamental logical fallacy that I keep talking about, which is um, causation and correlation are not always the same. Some schools may be better equipped in terms of having a very strong counseling system, may have possibly an environment where kids are competing against each other, may have uh, possibly awareness and exposure at a young age, and that might help them, right? From that perspective, it's very difficult for me to say this school is better than every other school. But from an admission officer's point of view, they're not looking at the name of the school and making a decision, right? The environment a certain school has given you may have possibly helped you become a better version of who you are, and that will depend on each city and where you are and your circumstances and your affordability, whether you can afford certain schools. But from an admission officer's point of view, they're not looking at a school and making a decision, right? Equally, there are no quotas at Ivy League, which means if XYZ school has one student selected at, say, Stanford, does not mean a second student cannot be taken from the same school, right? There is no floor either, which means a Stanford or an Ivy League must take at least one student from this particular school or from this city. So there are no quotas, there are no floors. An admission officer will look at fit at the end of the day and decide whether the student should be admitted, not admitted. The school name itself doesn't play a role. And of course, if you happen to be in a school which doesn't have a formal system or doesn't have exposure, then it depends on whether you want to go to another school which offers that, or you want to create a parallel alternative ecosystem which helps you achieve that goal without having to change your school. Some students are very comfortable in a certain school, and that school has great teaching, but not looking towards Ivy Leagues or foreign colleges as such. But the child is thriving there, right? And I wouldn't want to move that child for that reason, and may find other ways to be able to address that sort of, that issue.
I think there's always the conversation of context and distance that you've traveled ultimately, regardless.
Absolutely. Yeah, and we've seen students come from cities that we haven't even heard of, forget schools, right? So there's a clear evidence that a lot of admission officers are looking at high potential students from across the country, across the globe, and from parts and in fact, they get excited when they see students coming from areas which they've never seen them, and that student is truly inspiring and high potential. It also gives them the context that in spite of coming from backgrounds or contexts where they don't even are not even familiar with college admissions in the US, they've traveled such a long distance to be at par with possibly students coming from international curriculum students.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Great, thank you for that, Kunal.